facilitator, Mr. Olawolua Akinlolua. I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. He's a senior advisor at Pro Health International on a global health security project. He works in the intersection of public health emergency management and biorisk management, supporting key national and regional stakeholders in the health security space in Nigeria and West Africa to develop legislation, policy briefs, contingency plans, SOPs, and implementation guidance for planning for and response to public health events. He has 9 years of experience supporting preparedness and response at the regional, national, and subnational level. He has keen ongoing research interests in how coordination mechanisms can strengthen governance for health security and how to effectively leverage military and law enforcement capacities for health security. He'll be taking us through a session on setting up coordination mechanisms to foster public health emergency preparedness at national and regional level. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Mr. Olawolua.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Olawolua, you can start.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I start, I just wanted to say to Susan before she ended her presentation that Nigeria did apply for the International Joint Bioterrorism Investigation Training Package in late 2019, and the training was supposed to happen sometime in 2020. We did with the help of Dr. Dan Duval of the US CDC, now retired, but somehow the training never happened because of COVID and the resultant travel restrictions. So just to say that I have an experience with the process of expressing interest and the response from the FBI and related agencies. Thank you for all your support. So I would start by just establishing what
recording in progress.
What the objective of my talk today would be. This is just to spotlight the role of coordination mechanisms in public health emergency management and response. And we're going to use 2 recent use cases. The first is the linking public health to security technical area, which my organization supports, which was set up in 2019, and whose primary focus is the detection, investigation, and response to deliberate events. The other use case is the setup of a multilateral framework for information sharing, surveillance information sharing, but essentially setting up a multilateral framework that has the potential for a lot of other use cases within the health security space. So first of all, a few things about me. The intro already gave you most of what you needed to know. But essentially, I work at Pro Health International on a project called the Integrated Health Surveillance in Integrated Public Health Emergency Response. Our focus basically is supporting the Federal Ministry of Health, the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, and related agencies in workforce development, infrastructural support, and other kind of technical support to both interpret the international health regulations and to essentially implement, build capacities for health security in the country. One of the areas, the more recent areas of support that we've been giving to the government of Nigeria is the support to the Office of the National Security Advisor, where the National Technical Working Group for Linking Public Health Security is located. So the first thing I would like to do is establish what I mean by a coordination mechanism. Then we'll look at the use cases very quickly. So when I say a coordination mechanism in the context of health security, I'm talking about the setup of a committee, like a network or a working group or a task force, any platform essentially that brings together a multi-sectoral and diverse group of stakeholders that plan, mobilize resources, make key decisions, and offer technical support to stakeholders across national, subnational, and regional levels. The essential thing, the key thing to note with coordination mechanism is that they offer a platform for multi-sectoral exchange of context. A coordination mechanism is fully working or fully functional when it enables the breakdown of context silos and the breakdown of expertise silos. So a good example is if we need to implement a measure at points of entry related to international travel. The public health agencies or the public health practitioners may not necessarily have the context needed to fully formulate a coherent plan for international travel related measures. But if they do have in the room partners from the Civil Aviation Authority and other agencies from the points of entry sector, that context gap, that knowledge gap is broken. So this essentially is the reason why we need a coordination mechanism. I'll go further into what it does. Like I said, it breaks down context and expertise silos. It helps us establish a common picture. So you want to ensure that when you're responding to an event, the epidemiologist and the security agent and the private sector all have a common picture. We understand the risk as it should be. And also we are using a common language. Again, it bridges communication gaps. It ensures that we don't have to go through multiple layers before we communicate something, and then it's bonds red tape. Essentially, the questions that a coordination mechanism at any level of any kind helps us to answer is when there is a public health event or emergency happening, are we seeing the same events in the same way? Do we have the same assessment or characterization of the risk? It's entirely possible that an epidemiologist may not see what is required to be seen for an event to be considered a deliberate event. An epidemiologist just sees symptoms, an outbreak, their index of suspicion about the deliberate, about malicious use, as it were, is rather low compared to an intelligence officer or compared to a military officer. And when we have coordination mechanisms that contain all the sectors, we're able to share expertise, share perspective, and arrive at what is close to a common picture, a common risk characterization. We also want to know that we have every resource available to us to deal with this. It's often the case that when public health actors are responding to public health emergencies, they have, they only think of counting on the resources that they have. Meanwhile, there's probably a high-level military lab and then extensive logistic capacity in terms of warehouses, in terms of trucks, in terms of airlifting capacity that could have been used at the start of the response that isn't available because there is no knowledge of its availability. So we want to know that all the resources that we have, we're using all the resources that we have. It's untenable if we lose ground against an event or a response or in a response because we were using less resources than we were able to. And then that's related to how quickly we're able to move. It doesn't, we can easily say the military, for instance, or the private sector have capacity to move logistics, to move, say, highly fragile, highly sensitive luggage from point A to point B in a country faster than, say, public health officers will be able to manage that, because they have extensive training, extensive experience doing that regularly. And so we want to know that everything that we can possibly do to reduce the impact of the unfolding events is being done. And this is the reason why we set up emergency operation centers, the reason why we set up task forces, the reason why we set up, committees that respond to events. Now, so I would speak to what Nigeria did. Two things Nigeria did to help them respond. Set up coordination mechanisms that helped us, that has been helping us build health security capacity for both Nigeria and for both the region. So the first is the linking public health security. So in 2019, partly as a response to the joint external evaluation that was conducted in 2017 in Nigeria, a key recommendation of that joint external evaluation is the setup of a National Technical Working Group for linking public health security. I don't know if we're all aware of what the joint external evaluation is. It's a tool designed by the WHO to help state parties do an assessment of their health security capacities across 19 technical areas. One of the technical areas is linking public health to security. The key target of setting up such a coordination mechanism, the technical working group, is to, in the event of a biological event of suspected or confirmed deliberate origin, to have a country be able to conduct rapid multi-sectoral response, including the capacity to link public health and law enforcement, and to provide and or request effective and timely international assistance, including to investigate alleged use of malicious use of pathogens among civil populations. So the picture there you see is the picture of the inaugural meeting of the National Technical Working Group for Linking Public Health Security. My team helped support both technically and funded the setup of that organization, of that technical working group. It was located in the office of the National Security Advisor. This was because that office already conducts or performs a coordination role in the security space, both for the armed forces, a coordination role that brings together the armed forces, the security agencies, and the law enforcement agencies to ensure that there is a common picture against any threat, whether it's terrorism or whether it's any other kind of security threat. So in the years following the inauguration of this meeting, of this technical working group, the group has done a few things to ensure that we are able to build capacity, and these are the things we've done. 1 minute. All right, we've established a joint national biosecurity common picture, or rather in the process of establishing that. We've conducted joint trainings and exercises. One of them would have been the international joint bioterrorism training that we requested. But in the meantime, we've also conducted a training on biorisk management, another training on public health emergency management. And in all the cases, it's a joint training, meaning we have members of the public health agencies in the room, while we also have members of the armed forces, the security agencies in the room. We've also conducted simulation exercises as part of this capacity building exercises. One of the advantages of having joint exercises is that those are the opportunities to have to actually break down the context barriers. You now I mean, if you do an exercise where you have an event unfolding in, say, there's a city in Nigeria that is that's known for mining. With one of our scenarios for one of the exercises we did, had an event unfolding in that city, um, and the conclusion of the public health agencies or members from public health agencies was a suspicion of um, mining activities leaking into drinking water and contaminating the drinking water, causing the diseases, the symptoms that was being reported. But a few of the security agencies have a rather different perspective, because there was also the additional context of the fact that northern Nigeria generally it's a very volatile area, has the security problem with ISWAP and a number of other so-called bandits moving around. There was suspicion of some malicious action, especially given the value of those mining fields. So it becomes clear when you conduct exercises like that that public health experts generally have a bias or a bent towards being preoccupied with biosafety, and less or have less intuition for biosecurity as a way of viewing events. And it is this this shifting of the perspective towards a more common ground that is what we are aiming at for here. One of the things we also did that we have done and we're doing is we're adapting a national counterterrorism crisis doctrine that was signed into law recently into for the bioterrorism use case. Naturally, the document doesn't go into any detail about bioterrorism, but it's the principles and the doctrines it proposes are broad enough to accommodate that. So we're developing specific communication, detection, coordination protocols, thresholds, and how to essentially respond using that document. It's essentially the legal instrument on which we're basing a lot of the collaboration and investigative actions needed to be taken if a deliberate event is suspected. And the other thing we are doing is establishing a resource sharing framework that ensures that there is a common picture or bird's eye view, as it were, among all agencies of what exists or what capacities exist. The resource matrix has asset categories like human resource, laboratories, logistics, which involve things like warehouses, trucks, airlifting capacity. It is often the case, we saw during the COVID-19 response, especially in the early days of the response, during the lockdowns and beyond the lockdowns, that there was significant capacity that we were not aware of in the military and the security sector. So for instance, there were a number of labs within the security sector that had PCR capacity that had never been used, even during they were not used even during the Ebola scare we had in 2014, 15, or during any of the outbreak Nigeria has had since then. But once during COVID, because there was a presidential task force that had the force of the center bringing everyone together, or the force of the presidency, as it were. All of these resources were revealed, and it was surprising that there was so much resources available that weren't being taken advantage of by both national level and sub-national level public health actors. And so one of the things we wanted to do was ensure that there is a clear picture of what is where and what can be used for what in response to emergencies, whether it's a large-scale emergency like COVID or a smaller scale emergency like a cholera outbreak somewhere, or Lassa fever outbreak, which is the current event we have in Nigeria. Um, Right, so this is a broad overview of what we've been doing. As a matter of fact, we do have a workshop planned for November this year. And in that workshop, we would continue to extend the gains made across this three areas. So I will move on quickly to the second use case, then I'll pause for questions. So the second use case requires some context setting. The first thing to know is that Nigeria is is often thought of as being in West Africa, but we do in fact have borders with two Central African countries. We have land borders with Benin and Niger to our left and our north, to the west and to the north. And to the north and to the east, we have borders with, as you can see on this map, with Chad and Cameroon. Chad and Cameroon are in Central Africa. But that's not the only reason why Nigeria is in a interesting, or rather strategic epidemiological situation. We know that currently Central and West Africa is a hotbed of zoonosis, a lot of emerging infection outbreaks happening. There's also the fact that there is a lot of movement of persons and goods in this area. There is the trans-Saharan routes, which terminates in Nigeria across the Sahel, and it's a volatile security situation, and the fact that migrants both set out largely from this part of the country, from this part of the region, and largely terminate here too when they are being sent back. We also understand that there is a corridor. In fact, one of the largest corridor in terms of human traffic in Africa, the Lagos-Abidjan corridor. It passes through Ghana, Togo, Benin, and it's significant for human traffic. So because of this, and also because although West Africa, through the ages of West African Health Organization, has a lot of coordination mechanism to try to create a common language and picture and have and build capacity in West Africa. For instance, they do have a biosecurity regional working group. They have an MOU for information sharing for public health events. Although that MOU has not been signed by the ministers, it's been in the works for more than half a decade. But the region is doing this all this work. But we understand that that work is not sufficient for us, since we have borders with countries that are not part of West Africa. So what we set out to do was to create a contract around most of these capacities with these four countries that surround us, to have a sort of coordination platform. First of all, where we starting with establishing critical information requirements that we share between each other. So what we did was set out to establish a national cross-border technical committee. This technical committee consists largely of agencies within Nigeria, but in addition to that, we have a special guest role for the international health regulations focal persons, who, by the way, in case you're not aware, are responsible for notification of any events to the WHO network internationally. We have that office and an additional office from the MOH from each one of the four countries around us. We had a term of reference and a plan for the near term, which is like a 2-year plan. And then we decided to start with the basics of agreeing on terms for sharing surveillance information, essentially there's an event, there's an outbreak of disease, or there's a public health event, which is not even an outbreak of any event at all. It could be a chemical event unfolding in any part of a border community. We have a protocol for national level exchange of information and joint investigation, and district level exchange of information and joint investigation. The district level bit of the work is a little bit requires a little bit of work to ensure that the officers at the district level have the capacity to respond, to detect, to investigate, and to respond. What we have done to do that is try to establish at the district level cross-border forums. These are pictures of cross-border forums that have been established in the last 1 year at the Nigerian-Niger border and at the Nigerian-Benin border here. So what these groups do essentially is build capacity, have a platform where they meet regularly, periodically for some, monthly for some, depending on what they decide, and have a shared picture of what triggers constitutes an event and how they'll set out to conduct joint investigations and share resources. There have been a lot of cases of instances where a lot of joint investigation and shared resources have happened. In cases where AFP cases have been detected in the Nigerian-Niger border area, and in instances where recently a suspected Lassa case was discovered in the Nigerian-Benin border. This is what we think we would achieve with this going forward. We want to hold regular multilateral engagement on information sharing, joint investigation, and response. And as much as possible, we would like to expand the scope, the health security scope of this to more than just sharing information and potential joint investigation of events. We want to eventually, this is not part of the near-term plan, it's part of the 2-year plan, but eventually we want to have a common picture for biosecurity priorities and do joint capacity building, and then monitor progress and respond to district level events. At the district level, we want to expand the number of borders. Nigeria has more than 80 individual manned ground crossings. Those are the manned ones. So there's quite a lot. We're going to try to expand where we have this structured cross-border forums and ensure that they have facilitated meetings. In order to set this up, we sent down teams to each one of those borders where we set up these forums and had them do some hand-holding and capacity building in setting up these forums. One other thing that I didn't speak to because it's out of the scope of this is that each of the ground crossings where this happened have something called a public health emergency contingency plan. It's an all-hazard plan that is activated whenever there is an event around there. But that's a completely different topic. I will just speak quickly now to considerations and challenges of setting up coordination mechanisms that we have encountered in our experience. In my experience, each time there's been an attempt to have coordination mechanisms that has worked, it's because there is a dedicated facilitator doing it, facilitating that coordination mechanism. In the case of COVID-19, for instance, when most countries set up task forces, it is largely because it was centered in the executive. Most of the other coordination mechanisms we have, like the National Public Health Emergency or Operation Centers, have clear roles about facilitation. For other public coordination mechanisms like TWGs, committees that are external to the PHEOC at the national level or the state level, often an external third-party facilitator is for the early days, before silos are broken down and contexts are shared, is very critical. And even when we set up PHEOCs, it's often the case that I have some experience with the NCDC team that has been setting up subnational PHEOCs in Nigeria. It's often the case that there's a need for some handholding to ensure that the coordination bit is gotten right. One of the misconceptions that people have about coordination mechanisms is that they are essential to response and only to response. But it is my belief, it's our finding that the best work of coordination mechanisms are done outside of response times. When simulation exercises have been conducted by EOCs or joint capacity building have been done, there are a lot of things that happen that ensure that when an event happens and responses is needed to be done, it is movement is much swifter, and work is done in much more smoother fashion than if coordination mechanisms are only set up during emergencies. So it's essential that TWGs, task forces, public health emergency operation centers continue to run both during emergencies and outside of emergencies. Of course, there are for PHEOCs, there are modes of operation. We have the watch mode, the alert mode, and the response mode. And during watch mode, what you do is gather information, conduct exercises, conduct trainings, and all that. Another thing to point out is that coordination mechanism needs to be integrated. It is essential that we have not just one coordination mechanism, not just one national model of all coordination mechanisms. We need subnational, we need sector-specific coordination mechanisms. For instance, a coordination mechanisms for public health events in aviation may be necessary. Such mechanisms need to be linked to a central mechanism. If there is a national PHEOCs, to be good for that, for any sector-specific mechanism to be linked to that, or any subnational committee or task force to be linked to that, to ensure that there is easy passage of information between groups, and that the country is working from a general blueprint or speaking the same language when it comes to risk communication. Finally, the joint, I think I've mentioned this before, that the joint capacity building and the exercises that we conduct is the critical part that breaks down the silos, that ensures that we converge around a general common context when over time, as we facilitate these operations in coordination mechanisms. So these are my thoughts. I hope I wasn't being too fast. I speak a little bit fast. So please, if you have questions, ask them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Olawoluwa, for that wonderful session. Do we have any questions or comments regarding what was shared? Okay.
Okay, thank you for this presentation. I have a question or a comment. I will say a comment. You know, there's so many committee, bilateral committee between, for example, Niger and Nigeria. You have a committee, a technical cooperation committee that hold a meeting every year. Do you think this can be an opportunity when we can discuss security, health security, and also one health discussion on health? Because this committee hold every year, but it's mostly about education, trade, and if you can take the opportunity to add a discussion on health security, I think it can be a good opportunity for country to discuss about that issue.
Yes, so I agree. A lot of the times when bilateral ties are set up, what often happens is that it's about trade, about security. The first Lagos Abidjan Corridor organization that was set up was essentially about trade. But over time, after the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, a health component was added to the Lagos Abidjan corridor. So I believe that health security components need to be added to any bilateral committees or agreements being struck. The only challenge is that that's an annual meeting, and you require something more responsive to have an effective coordination mechanism. So, but I believe that we should move towards ensuring that most bilateral engagements or multilateral engagements consider health security as a key agenda.
We have another question here.
Thank you for the presentation. My concern comes in with approaching a common language or picture, given the fact that we have what we call an event geography or pathogen geography. So I'm looking at how we can approach a common language or picture, but some of the pathogens are localized for a specific area, or even the way they affect and the way the infectious cycle happens, or the way the event turns around, it could be different from the organization or country I want to partner with. So how do you go about that in terms of coordination?
I didn't quite hear everything, but I assume you are talking about the fact that countries have different set of priorities when it comes to infectious diseases.
Yes.
Correct. Yes. So what we did, both in the work we did, we're doing with WAHO to design the information sharing framework for the 14 countries, and for the 5-country framework we're setting up with Benin, Niger, and Cameroon. We initially set out with a table that has each country's set of priority diseases. We understand that Nigeria's set of priority disease is very different from, not very different. Often it's just one disease or two that are off the list from Ghana's list of priority infectious diseases. So we have a table that have each person's list of priority diseases. But what it means is if I share a border with Benin, automatically Benin's list of priority diseases becomes mine when there's an event happening in my borders of that priority disease from Benin. So I respond and report as if this is a priority disease for us. So that is the essential. In fact, that's one of the key objectives of this. That a disease is not on a list of priority diseases doesn't mean I will treat it as any other disease if it's happening at a border with a neighboring country that has that disease as a priority disease. So one of the things we do is have that table where we share a common picture and we'll agree that these are priority diseases for the region. Countries can reserve the right to say we still only have 14 priority infectious diseases, but we understand that X disease is a priority to Niger. And if it's happening within our borders, close to Niger's border, we're going to respond to it with the same, take it serious as much as Niger is. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
So thank you very much for an excellent presentation, and I highly commend you for your work in creating networks before the event. This is something that's I've been working on probably the last 15 years or so, is trying to build those networks prior to events. So I really appreciate what you're saying. In your slide where you mentioned the key questions and the key outcomes, that's a wonderful summary of the benefits of doing this. But I think you could add to that the human dimension, that by creating, you did mention getting rid of red tape, but by having people meet face to face beforehand, you make communications so much easier once you need to have that rapid and clear communication during an outbreak. So you're, by having those meetings, by creating the networks beforehand, you definitely are facilitating better communication. You're creating the team ahead of the event. You're, you've mentioned red tape, but you're getting rid of that sort of defending each person's turf. You get away from that jealousy over responsibility. And I think you talked about getting common language. Common language is hugely important because it helps build towards common purpose and common goal, which also builds into motivation and to good team forming. So I think all of those things are things that you can add to that great slide that you have about the benefits of creating networks ahead of time. One small question, and I was very interested to see that you've been doing bilaterals between Nigeria and all of its nations. I worked briefly with the Middle Eastern Center for Infectious Disease Surveillance, which is Israel, Palestine, and Jordan. Now you can imagine the political difficulties of setting that up, that surveillance network. What they discovered was when they tried to do joint exercises, the disparity between the preparedness and the advanced state of Israeli preparedness vis-a-vis particularly the Palestinian preparedness created a level of national embarrassment. And what we found was it was better to do the national exercises first before trying to do the trilateral exercise, so that the Jordanians and the Palestinians didn't feel embarrassed during the exercise vis-a-vis, in relation to their performance vis-a-vis the performance of the Israelis. Have you encountered similar issues in trying to deal with your neighbors, and is that why you chose to go the bilateral route first? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So it's not an exact match of the situation, but it's very similar. Nigeria is is much bigger and much more. The systems, the health systems, are much more sophisticated, I believe, than what we have around our neighbors. A quick example is that Nigeria has a port health services, that is the competent public authority at points of entry. A number of our neighboring countries do not have that. Benin used to have that, but for some reason in 2019, the president withdrew them after some reports of corruption or something. I don't think Niger has them at all. I think the district, the DSNO, the district surveillance officer, doubles as someone that investigates any report of events at the border. And often there is just a general, whenever there is a joint event, there's a general a clear indication of the gap in capacity, especially when it comes to preparedness. This is a little bit ironic because, or paradoxical, because at the district level, at the border themselves, there's a strange pattern of health seeking that we see. So if one of the reasons why we've had up to 3 cases in the past 3 years of Lassa fever cases from Nigeria crossing to Benin is that people often go to the French-speaking countries to seek healthcare if they are ill, and so that is one clear pattern of behavior. But in terms of being able to bring national capacity to address an outbreak, Nigeria seems to have this muzzle for that, and that's probably just due to having more resources than its neighbors. So yes, there's this disparity. It's not as extreme as what you have described with Israel and its neighbors, but yes, we've seen this. But we also just know that Nigeria shares border with Benin, but Benin doesn't share border with Cameroon. Neither does Chad share border with Benin. So we understand that we need to do the bilateral engagements pari passu with the multilateral engagements, regardless of any disparity in capacity. Does that answer your question? And thank you very much for the comments about that slide. I would definitely make it better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I would like to know what do you do to maintain the coordination mechanism in national level and a country border meeting in crisis period and after crisis. If because many of the funding is given with partner, it is possible for you to maintain this mechanism?
So yes, so that's a question that's always that's always asked. What is the sustainability plan? What is your plan to ensure that if you're out of the system can work on its own? So I'll start with the district level. A number of the meetings, in fact, that are happening at the district level happen without our input. So we have a team that has gone to the district level to do some handholding and supported meetings. But for instance, in the Nigerian-Benin border, we've had multiple borders that have had meetings that they set up on their own and conducted without us being there. They just sent us pictures and reports. And in the Nigerian-Niger border, as a matter of fact, historically, they've had meetings that were in the days when the polio outbreak was rather acute in that region. They had a similar forum, to address cross-border transmission of polio cases. And that forum still exists and still functions outside of external inputs. So I believe that once stakeholders have a sense of the risks involved and the value of such a forum, they would find a way to support it. That's not been the case with a lot of district level borders that we have withdrawn support from because of funding restrictions. Sometimes they just go cold and don't do anything until maybe there is an event, and then they start calling. But we know that a few of them, like the ones I've mentioned in the Niger border and the one at Kamba at the Nigerian-Benin border, have been self-sustaining. So I imagine that in certain cases that can happen. But the solution we're putting in place for that is this national cross-border committee that is meant to conduct monitoring of the district level forums. At the national level, everything that has been done with the support of Pro Health International and the the West African Health Organization, as well as the support of WHO. But I believe that that the NCDC, that is the IHR unit, the International Health Regulations unit in NCDC, and the Federal Ministry of Health, Port Health Services, already have certain allocations in their budget to support some of these activities. As a matter of fact, there is a current series of supportive supervision visits that is ongoing, that is partly funded by the MOH itself. So most of our advocacy over the years have always been that these novel interventions that we introduce into the system are included in the annual planning documents so that they are funded. That is not often the case, but this part of the work, the advocacy for funding, for sustainability, is the hard part of the work. It takes years to take effect. And we know that it would eventually work, but we just need to keep working on it. Does that answer the question?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have any questions here or online? Okay, if we don't have any other questions or comments, I would like to thank Mr. Olawoluwa from Pro Health International for taking us through that session and sharing very practical ways through which we can have this regional coordination of public health. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next we are going to have a not very different session that's still on the topic of policy, and that is biosafety and biosecurity law and regulation case of Africa, which will be facilitated by Dr. Robert Chibuka, the project coordinator of the SIN BioAfrica Global Catastrophic Biological Risks Initiative. He's a biosafety and biosecurity expert. I introduced him extensively today, so today I'll just ask him to come and take on his session.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, by names of Chibuka Robert, and I'm here to take you through yet another topic which many of you have come across in so many different fora. So I would like to assume that there's nothing that's going to be new here, but along the way, I think we shall be sharing some experiences here and there. That's the most important thing. And my topic is biosafety and biosecurity, laws and regulations, case of Africa. I cannot know everything in Africa in as far as that topic is concerned, but I'll give, what I know, specifically Uganda, and then we reflect on what happens in our respective countries. So I want to show you the content outline. I'll have the objective of this session, the outcomes of the session, the content, which includes some key terms, and I'll somehow introduce you to, I don't know if some of you have come across it,
ISO 35001 of 2019, very current. And then several other regulatory frameworks and other. Then allow a summary and references. So that is our objective, to help the participants understand the status and implementation of biosafety and biosecurity in Africa, in conjunction with the national laws, regulations, standards, and guidelines. So that's the objective. And then I have the outcomes here listed. That by the end of this presentation, you should be able to appreciate the role of regulatory frameworks in defining the context in which biosafety and biosecurity activities should be executed. List the key national and institutional regulatory frameworks relevant to biosafety and biosecurity. Make comparisons between the various key frameworks, demonstrating how they reinforce one another, and then link the requirements of the key frameworks to routine activities in their various contexts. So I hope I'm okay here with the Bloom's taxonomy. We went through the Bloom's taxonomy yesterday. I hope I'm yeah. So just to help us now understand what we are going to go through, I have the definitions here of biosafety and biosecurity. So biosafety means practices and controls that reduce the risk of unintentional exposure or release of biological materials. So that is the definition. And the key word here is unintentional. It's an intentional exposure. Then it is, I got it from ISO 35001, and that clause. Biosecurity, these are practices and controls that reduce the risk of loss, theft, misuse, diversion of, or intentional unauthorized release of the biological materials. So those are the definitions. Then I wanted to give a practical example here to demonstrate what biosafety is, and I'll read it. A laborotechnician has just prepared a culture of Mycobacterium tuberculosis in order to conduct a drug sensitivity test. He is wearing gloves, a surgical mask, and a lab coat, and is using a biosafety cabinet which has not been certified in 4 years. You see that? The biosafety cabinet has not been certified in 4 years. What does that mean? So, what are the questions here? The questions are, what is the hazard in this scenario? You see, with biosafety, we talk about the hazards. You'll see what we talk about when we come to biosecurity. We talk about here, what is the likelihood of exposure to these organisms, and what are the consequences of exposure? So this was unintentional release of the microorganisms. So here, the person is wearing the gloves, the surgical mask, and the lab coat. Who does this protect? Himself, alone, but does not protect others who are, the environment and others who are around him, see? And this is the least effective. If you can see, the use of PPEs is the least effective in the hierarchy of the controls. And the safety cabinet, where does it fall? which is faulty. I mean, which has not even been certified for the last, what? 4 years. That falls under the engineering what? The engineering controls. So, you see, this is where now the problem is. You see, this is unintentional exposure. The person didn't know. So whose role was it supposed to be to make sure that this safety cabinet functions? So we shall see more when it comes to roles and responsibilities under the ISO 35001, because it outlines the processes and procedures through it. And then an example of biosecurity. Win is not here. I used her name. I wanted to ask for permission. Winnie discovers her culture of Mycobacterium tuberculosis extremely drug resistant. Yeah. Meanwhile, a local animal rights group has you see, in biosecurity, that is the language, has threatened to disrupt laboratory operations and generate publicity by breaking in and steal. You see, steal. That is theft, stealing the agents. They believe taking samples of this extremely drug resistant will generate most publicity. You see? So here, the question is, what is the threat in the scenario? So we talk about threats. What's the likelihood of theft? Because security, you know, you don't want people to access, you see, these, whatever. And what are the consequences if theft takes place of that material? You understand? So that's the difference between biosecurity and biosafety. So these are other terms, standards, regulations, which you read, legal requirements, and all that. So now getting into the subject matter. As for the introduction, the risk of unintentional exposure to or intentional release of pathogens and toxins and associated recirculated information has been recognized globally. And to address this risk, a number of regulatory frameworks have been developed at the international, regional, national, and institutional levels in the 21st and the 20th and the 21st century. It is important to comply with these regulations. And these regulations are under three different levels. We have the international laws and regulations, we have the national laws and regulations, and we can have agency policies and regulations. Right. So, when we are doing all these at our local levels, we have some guiding documents. We have, for example, the international legal frameworks and guidance, guidance principles. For example, we have the BWC, the Biological Weapons Convention. I think you've heard about that, BWC. We have the UN Security Council Resolution 1540. You've heard about that. What level of implementation are these? We have the IHR 2005. A lot of people know something about this. And then we have the international guidance, for example, the WHO Laboratory Biorisk Management Manual, which are available. And then we have the international standards or consensus agreements, ISO 35001 of 2019. Has anybody come across this? ISO 35001? How about the CWA 15793? We've had. But CWA has been retired. But you realize that a lot of what is here is in the 35001. So these are the documents that help us to come up with several of our laws, regulations, and all that, and then the policies. Yeah. For example, the 35001 is just a guiding document. It's not that it's a must that it has to be implemented by government. So, what is this ISO 35001? I told you I'm going to bore a bit with this because it forms the basis for what we are discussing. So it's a biorisk management system built on the concept of continuous improvement. This is what it involves. You plan, you do, you check, and then act. So what do we do in planning? We need to establish the objectives, the programs, and the processes. This is the beginning point that will give us the rest of that. You understand? This is where we need even to clearly understand to anticipate what the problems could be as far as the hazard is. And then we need to implement the processes as planned, you see. And then these processes must be monitored for compliance. But if there is any problem, you take actions. You take what? Action for continual what? Improvement. Yeah? So this is the PDCA cycle. Plan, do, check, act cycle. Briefly about this, I've already said it was originated from the CWA. The same workshop agreement 157/93 of 2011, but we also had the 2008, those who have been following. So it uses the PDCA model and the AMP management systems approach. What is AMP? Good, and performance. So it's the first internationally recognized management standard to address hazards associated with laboratories where biological materials are handled at all containment levels. It sets out requirements for a management system to enable organizations to effectively identify, monitor, and control risks associated with laboratory biosafety and biosecurity. You see? It's a very, very important document. I don't know if anybody has come across it, because it's not easy, it's not online. You just have to buy it. Somebody bought it for me, and I have a copy, so I'm very lucky. It also provides a structured approach to manage a risk associated with people, facilities, and working procedures within the laboratory environment. So this is what I mean by, you see, when I talk about biorisk management, you'll say I'll be interchanging biosafety, biosecurity. But when I use biorisk, then I'm referring to both. So this is the AMP model, assessment, mitigation, and performance, which is also linked with the plan, do, check, act for purposes of continuous improvement. Just a definition of a biorisk assessment. It's a process of identifying the hazard and evaluating the risks associated with biological agents and toxins, taking into account the adequacy of any existing controls, and deciding whether or not the risks are acceptable or unacceptable. So this is very critical wherever we are starting any activity involving any biological organism. We must understand that organism and put in place the right control measures. So it is this that's going to define the mitigation measures going forward. And then performance also of the mitigation measures must be evaluated for efficiency. So the measurements, whatever, which must be followed. So this, where does this come from? This comes from our risk assessment, the product of our risk assessment process. And it comes right from the hazard identification, risk characterization. That's where this one comes from, risk characterization. And then after risk characterization, you need to determine whether the risk is acceptable. Then you move forward. If it's unacceptable, then you look for the mitigation measures, and then the cycle continues. So when you do your risk characterization, you will end up with something like this: likelihood versus consequences, and then you have the risk is low, either a moderate or high. So the mitigation measures here will be totally different depending on the risks that you have identified. Are we together? Thus far? So with this ISO 35001, it emphasizes leadership. Leadership is key in the management of hazards within any facility. And it emphasizes the critical role of top management. Why? They are the ones with the ultimate responsibility of the organization biorisk management system. Why? Because they set policy and they also provide resources for the implementation of the what? Of the risk management system, the biorisk management system. They also have the senior management in that, who are responsible for overseeing the biorisk management and ensuring implementation of the operation function of the biorisk management system. I'm taking you through this because it's very, very important. They also have the scientific management. They also have the biorisk management committee, which is multidisciplinary, depending on the activities that are being carried out by the facility. So that's why I've ended the ISO 35001. And now I'm getting into the national frameworks, laws, acts, and policies that impact biosafety and biosecurity. But this will now be Ugandan-based, just showing you how Uganda is working on this. These are laws, regulatory framework, and responsible authority, as far as the laws are concerned. We have the Animal Diseases Act, how all domiciled in the midst of agriculture, animal industry and fisheries. So what you need to note here is how scattered these laws are and what challenge does it give to implementation of these laws. The Public Health Act, the Plant Protection Act, the Penal Code Act, National Environment Act, Water Act, Anti-Terrorism Act, Directorate of Public Prosecution, the East African Community Customs Management Act, Occupational Safety and Health Act, Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, Occupational Safety and Health Act. This is where it is domiciled. We have the Uganda, we have the guidelines here, which were developed also. The Uganda National Laboratory Biosafety Manual. This is the responsible authority. The National Health Laboratory and Diagnostic Services. You have the guidelines for Uganda National Health Laboratory Hub and Sample Transportation. The National Health Laboratory Waste Management Guidelines. The National Research Biobanking Guidelines. under the Uganda National Council of Science and Technology. The standard operating procedures for institutions, for institutional biosafety committees in Uganda, is under the Uganda National Council of Science and Technology. So some key aspects under these laws, for example, the Animal Disease Act, it requires diseased animals to be separated and reported, and also says that the minister has the powers. So you can see the key aspects of these. The Public Health Act has provisions for the prevention and suppression of infectious diseases. The the Plant Protection Act regulates the importation and exportation of plants, soil, and creates offense of release of pests and diseases. I don't want to go through all, but just giving you an example of what is going on here. There's also an anti-terrorism law here, targets people that engage in or carry out any acts of terrorism. The Act defines an act of terrorism as the manufacture, delivery, placement, discharge, or deterioration of any detonation of any explosive or lethal device in a place of public use or state or government facility with the intent to cause death or serious bodily harm or extensive destruction. That's the Anti-Terrorism Act. Still, something like what I've been discussing, I can't go, because of time, I may not go through all that. But when you get the slides, then you can go through. So here, I wanted to compare what we do here. And I think, is it Susan Kropp also talked about this? For example, in the US, somebody has already defined the select agents. The national, they have what we call the National Select Agents Registry, which oversees the activities of possession of biological agents and toxins, and have the potential of severe threat to public animal and plant health. You see, for us, we have scattered these roles and responsibilities, but here they have an overarching law. So I think when it comes to implementation, things becomes very easy. They have the Public Health Security and Bioterrorism Preparedness and Response Act of 2002, which mandates the Department of Health establish and regulate a list of biological agents and toxins that have potential to pose severe threat to public health and safety. They also have the Agricultural Bioterrorism Protection Act, which mandates the Department of Agriculture to establish and regulate a list of biological agents that have the potential to pose a severe threat to animal health, safety, plant health, and safety, or to safety of animals or plant products. Also, CDC and Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service share responsibility for some agents because they potentially threaten both humans and animals, the overlap agents. So how are we doing? Generally, biosafety and biosecurity, I think it's still at really a formative stage. Where are we? You know where we are. Yeah? And we discussed this yesterday, that it's only being discussed under the GMO. Yeah? We are still struggling to have these bills and policies passed. See, despite this problem we have, we don't have the biosafety and biosecurity policy in place. You see, I think this partly explains why we're doing so badly when it comes to preparedness. We have what we call the Biological Weapons and Toxin Convention, which I talked about in my first slides, and then the UN Security Council resolutions, 1540. I don't know how we are doing in the implementation of these. I think we shall get to know. And most importantly, that all states have the obligation to prevent and prohibit proliferation of what? Biological weapons as state party to the Biological Weapons Convention and as a member of the United Nations. So what is this Biological Weapons Convention? This one prohibits countries that have signed the treaty from developing, producing, stockpiling, acquiring, or retaining biological agents or toxins of types and quantities that have no jurisdiction for protective, defensive, or other peaceful purposes. The treaty also bans any equipment or means of delivery that is designed to use biological agents or toxins for hostile purposes or armed conflict. Then this is the UN Security Council Resolution 1540 with 3 primary obligations, which you will read also. So where are our issues in all these? Where do we stand if you compare us to other countries which have already implemented better biosecurity and biosafety requirements? Is there a problem of lack of awareness at the highest level? Scientists, maybe we've not done enough to sensitize these people. We don't have enough resources that is required. For example, how many BSL forces that we have in Africa? How many do we have? And how many do we have? Does the US have, for example? We have how many? Yes. We have only 3. Yes. Yes. Where? Where? Worldwide. But how about in the US? How many do we have?
I think it was more than 5 or 6.
No, they are more than.
No, not as you imagine. No. BSL-4 is very, very expensive.
Yes.
So
4 in the US, 3 in the UK.
Only 4 in the US and 3 in the UK.
And for the Arab countries, only Arab countries, and only the Middle East country is Saudi Arabia. And to surprise me to know that. Saudi Arabia is the only Arab country has the BSL.
Saudi Arabia.
One.
Yes.
Saudi Arabia? No. And then Africa? Yes. The Gabon, Cote d'Ivoire, and South Africa.
Cote d'Ivoire have
Yeah.
So you see? Do we have the sufficient technical expertise to detect pathogens? That one also is another one. Financial resources. But there is some hope with the international partnerships. Are encouraging laboratory programs to establish and maintain laboratory quality systems, the WHO accreditation and surveillance systems, the clinical laboratory improvement amendments of, yes, the ISO, these ISOs and this one. The international health regulations. These are an international legal instrument that is binding on 194 countries across the globe, including all member states of the World Health Organization. And the IHR requires that all countries can detect, assess, respond, report, and respond. So there is a lot of work going on around here to make sure that these are achieved. You never know, Uganda might have a BSL-4 in the future, because we are a hotspot for, the emerging pandemic threats. It could be a regional lab, you understand? We have DRC, where we have all these coming up. Yeah. You have the Global Health Security Agenda, with a vision, a world safe and secure from global health threats posed by infectious diseases. I think we're also all aware of this, isn't it, colleagues? It was launched in February 2014. Yeah? And we had a big meeting here in 2017 in Uganda. Yeah? The Kampala Declaration. And you have all come up across these action packages under the Global Health Security Agenda, and they are being supported around the world. Prevent, detect, and respond. I've participated very actively in Action Package Prevent 3, which is on promoting what? National biosecurity and biosafety systems. I think many of you have participated in these meetings. You have also done the joint external evaluations in your countries. Yeah? And what are these JEEs? It's a process that allows an external assessment of the country's capability and the capacity to deliver the core capacities outlined in the IHR, in the International Health Regulation. And that is detect, assess, report, and respond. You know the gaps. Within this, you get to know where the gaps are and try to work on those gaps in your respective countries. This is a map of 2018 showing which countries have either completed or which are in progress with the joint external evaluations. Is Egypt done with that? Yeah. With the Tunisia? My eyes can't read this properly. What is there? You did 2016? And you applied for? I think we're going to discuss. You want to go back?
What's the color coding you mean?
You can read here.
It's so small.
Hey, so small for me.
So
This actually green, these ones are the ones which have completed.
yes, and then
The green.
What about the yellow and blue?
Yellow, what is there? Ian?
yellow they have planned to conduct.
So the evaluating the plans, and the blue is the
The blue. Yes? Now these are the reports. This is one from the report, Yes. As I end my presentation, the summary, the world has long recognized the risks associated with work involving handling of biological materials. Regulatory frameworks have been developed at international, regional, national, and institutional levels, articulating the guiding principles that underpin measures taken to minimize these risks. And in this presentation, highlighted on the best regulations and requirements for biorisk management system, isn't it? Using the ISO 35001, so that lab personnel as well as managers can conduct work within a known legal environment. Some references, and then thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chivuka. We shall then take questions. However, there was a comment from online that they couldn't hear the audience's engagement. One of the interesting things was that there are only 69 BSL-4 labs, 3 in Africa. The 3 in Africa, we have one in Gabon, Cote d'Ivoire, and South Africa. The Arab countries only have one, so we are better in that respect. That was really the point of discussion in the audience. Sorry about that. All right, now we shall take questions and comments for Dr. Chivuka.
Okay, thank you. I have some questions. The first one is, is it any certification body for biosecurity and biosecurity in Africa?
In Africa?
Yes.
Do you have a certification body?
Yes, in Africa CDC we have currently a program called Certification and Training Program. This certification and training program, the aim of this program is to certify the biosafety and biosecurity professionals, and we have 4 levels. The first is beginning, then intermediate, then advanced, then expert. So each level, we working to get the list of the, along the continent, the expert in the intermediate level, in the advanced level, and the SME level. So this is the outcomes of this program. This program is started in Africa CDC in the last April, and implemented the first cohort in South Africa. The first cohort was about the biorisk management. Was in South Africa in the last August, and the next cohort in the middle of the August about this cohort about the waste management. So we have, as I mentioned, we have 4 levels. We have 4 domains. First one is the biorisk management. Second is the waste management. The third is the facility engineering, and the third is the biosafety cabinet, installation, selection, installation, maintenance, etc. So we are prioritize our needs because the resources is limited. I mean the number of employees in the Africa CDC managing this program is limited. So we are only started with the first 2 domains, the biorisk management and the waste management. Regarding the area, as all of you knows, we have 5 areas in our regions in Africa, based on the Africa or African Union classification: North, South, East, West, and Center. So why we start with the South Africa? Because the manager of this program decided that this program will not be conducted unless in the what's called Regional Center of Excellence. And Africa CDC are currently working to establish 3 Regional Center of Excellence. The only one is already established now is in the South Africa. So we are looking forward to establish more Regional Center of Excellence, and I hope we can get one in the North Africa. The high potentiality now is in Morocco. And I know that we are trying to engage and motivate other countries, especially Tunisia, to be involved. but there is some problem regarding the Tunisia application. But I think the deadline is tomorrow. Is the deadline for application is end of September. I am certainly sure that Morocco is already applied for regional center of excellence. So I hope we have hosting one in the North Africa. And later on, for the long term or middle term and long term, we will establish regional center of excellence in each region of the Africa. Yes. Thank you.
So we have not yet started, isn't it? It is still work in progress. So I also want to add, but who has been filling up the gap in there? It is, I don't know if you heard about IFBA, the International Federation of Biosafety Associations, that one. It is the one that has been filling up the gap. I recently sat for the exam. I hope I'll pass that one. So, yes.
Regarding IFBA, we are involved with IFBA in our program. And this program also include what's called the ECC, which is the Examination Certification Committee. The ECC is considered as a superior committee responsible for this training program. And the Maureen Elias, which is the CEO of the IFBA, is one of our ECC program. And also Dr. Sakawa also is a member of this committee. So we are considered the IFBA, but the advantage of the Africa CDC program than the IFBA is that we focused on the hands-on training in our program. Thank you.
Okay. So I just wanted to tell him that there's also that window. Before they start, there's IFBA, but you have to pay the dollars to have that. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I did the IFBA certification too
yes.
last year.
Yes.
Okay. The other question is, you know, what about certification for ISO, for example, 15190 or 35001? If you elaborate, yes.
That's expensive. Yes.
It's very expensive. Okay.
Basically, the ISO system is fairly commercial. I think for an institution to go through the whole process will cost you at least $25,000. But the big problem, at least in Africa, you've got the CDC accreditation program. But the big problem is that there tends not to be any internationally recognized accreditation body. Each country generally has to set up its own accreditation body to accredit the institutions that they are in compliance with ISO 35001. And to get to that stage, they need to themselves then accredit the auditors who are actually going to go to the institutions to assess whether they're meeting the standards. So you've got 2 stages before you can start. You've got to set up the national body. Your national accreditation body, whatever it's called, has to have an accreditation process which is in compliance with 35001. And then you have to accredit the auditors who are going to accredit the institutions. And those are the steps. I don't know where CDC is with that.
I am on the same page of Dr. Tim about the problem of ISO. We have, I think, not only in our country, I think in all countries depend only on the ISO. The problem of the ISO is, as Tim expressed now, they have national certification or accreditation body. This is national. So this body facing or acquired the problems of the nation. I don't want to talk in details about this. So it is so easy to get the ISO because this is the national. This is our local body. So by somehow you lose the trustability of this. So the impact also will be have very little effect. And this is the ISO accreditation, whatever the number of the ISO, is transferred from their main goals to improve the process whatever this process, and whatever the organization, transferred from this aim, good aim, to just documentary issues for some time, and then before we get inspected, for 1 month before the inspection, we prepare your documents, prepare some conditions, and then get inspected and get approval and return to the normal. So lose the main aim, which is a continual improvement. So I think in USA, not depends on the ISO. They have already the own standards. For Africa CDC, they don't depend on the ISO. They depend on their standards, and they are working on this, either through the legal framework. Even for the legal framework for biosafety and biosecurity, we also give the nation or the country the flexibility to apply according to their local context. But there is a framework they can depend on. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert, for great presentation. I want to comment on this presentation. Now we apply a separate effort for training about application of international regulation. We participate with Robert and Hidayah in a GBACT project from Germany to create what's called the simulator case study. How to apply IHR through an imagine case study, not true, but we try to publish this case study to train how to apply international regulation. But I think up till now, there is no obligation for apply international regulation in Africa. Also, this great effort of CDC or external effort. So, what's the solve? How to direct the thinking and effort to apply international regulation and announced, especially under COVID and monkeypox and so on. Thank you.
So I've been working in Pakistan since before ISO was adopted based on the CWA to get organizations there prepared for the ISO. And it's frustrating there because they have the national, it's the Pakistan National Accreditation Council, that exists. But they're going to take a while to get the ISO ready for the national implementation. So I think what institutions can do in the meantime is what I've done with the University of Veterinary and Animal Sciences in Lahore, is to take the ISO, actually in their case because it was before the ISO was published, we took the CWA and we went through the CWA and said, what do we need to put in place in UVAS? And we effectively brought UVAS into compliance on a voluntary, people hate the word self-accrediting because you can't self-accredit, but basically doing everything that's needed under the document, creating the policies, creating the structures, creating the committees, writing the SOPs, recording it all, having the training requirements, having the record keeping for training, all of these things are put in place. And then they have someone else from outside come and audit them. So although it's not officially ISO certified or accredited, they've got to themselves to the stage where when that becomes possible, they're immediately ready to go. So this is something that if you don't want to go through the expense of the ISO process of accreditation, as an organization you can do. You can essentially use the document as a guide to getting to that level.
So you're not supposed to implement everything within the document to the dot, no? And you know what is going to guide you? It is your risk assessment. What did you come up with? Then you refer to the guiding document of ISO 35001. What do you need to put in place, you see? What do you need to put in place? Then there's that leadership hierarchy, which I showed you. Top management, the senior management, scientific management, and all others. That is the committee now which will sit and then see how they can implement these based on their risk assessment. So it's not really completely that you must do everything. No, 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 no. It's not really binding. No, no. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to build on that point with the ISO 3501. There are two types of accreditation in the ISO system. There are ISOs which are prescriptive. They tell you exactly what you have to do. And then there are ISOs which are descriptive. They are ISOs that tell you what you need to achieve. ISO 35001 is a descriptive one. It doesn't tell you precisely what you need to do. It tells you what you need to achieve. And so it gives you a lot of latitude in how you go about achieving it. But it does clearly lay down, as Robert was saying, that you need to have those roles and responsibilities. You need to have the policy. You need to have the bodies and the structures within your organization to systematically consider these issues and document the entire process, and then to measure and to check that things are being implemented, to correct failures in implementation, and to improve the system continually. So long as you do all those things, how you do it is not prescribed by the document. I'd just like to add one more point, if I may, about the ISO 35001. Robert did a great job of describing the process whereby you do your risk assessment and decide whether risks are at a level that you can accept. I think that the document itself and the approach has one weakness. I wouldn't say failing, weakness, because it fails to address what I talked about yesterday when you don't have the information or you don't have confidence in your information. It assumes you can do a risk assessment. The same algorithm that they have for doing that risk assessment, which I'm happy to share a visual version of that with everyone if you want it, can be readily adapted to the situation where you don't have that certainty. So instead of necessarily going from hazard identification to risk analysis, you can just do the hazard identification where you can't calculate the risk. But that requires that you have something which isn't explicit enough in the document, in my view. And that is you understand your risk profile. What is the risk that you are willing to assume? It's stated implicitly in the document, but it's not explicit enough for my taste. And this becomes particularly important when you're dealing with risks that you can't quantify, the hazards that you know you have, but you can't quantify into a risk. Because then when you're faced with that type of hazard, you really, really have to rely on your risk profile. You have to, in HROs they call these never events. What are the events you never want to happen? And how much are you willing to put in the way of resources, time, money, equipment, to avoid those never events? So that's the only thing I want to add. I think that's the only weakness of the ISO, is that it doesn't stress what to do in cases of uncertainty, and it doesn't stress enough that risk profile thing. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you. Oh, your neighbor.
I would like to know what is how the reference lab are distributed in Africa. For example, if our lab can do well the diagnostic of emerging pathogen, for example, for polio, we have exigence to send the sample from Côte d'Ivoire. I would to like to know what is the criteria.
I would like to explain that we already have a framework interesting with what you are saying, what you are talking about. What you are talking about is how the labs handling the high consequence pathogen or toxins. So we have a framework in Africa CDC talking about the regulatory and certification framework for the laboratory handling the high consequence agent and toxins. In this framework, we have checklist. Firstly, you have standard for the minimum standards for the labs handling the high consequence agent and toxins. Number two, we have checklist for the inspectors who make the inspection of these labs. Third, we already established program for the training the instructors to work on this. So I can share with you this framework. Thank you.
Is that helpful? You've got the answer. Oh, okay.
Africa CDC developed a template for national development of guideline for biosecurity and biosafety. So I don't know from what we show if you use this template. And the second question is if a country has already, guideline for biosafety, but we have discussed it yesterday, that it's mainly on agriculture and the environment. And he want to adopt this one. So we will have two guidelines on biosafety, how to handle this thing.
Yes, I didn't talk about it, but what I know, CDC has already developed the templates, isn't it? Which are going to be cascaded down. I think they have already shared them. So have you started working on that? You have a copy of that? Okay. So I think we are doing some work already along that area. As far as biosecurity is concerned, the policy. CDC has already taken the lead and is already guiding on that. Yep. Okay. Any other?
Regarding your frameworks, you mentioned that Uganda national registration, our regulatory, Uganda national regulatory frameworks. You're talking about many frameworks. And I know that you enumerate maybe 2 or 3 in the reference. My question is that all these frameworks is available online or available publicly?
I mentioned some frameworks. In my presentation? Yes. Yes. Yes, they are available. Yes, you can look for them. They are available. Okay.
Do we have any comments or questions online? Yes, I see Dr. Fatnasi has a question. You can please unmute and ask.
Hello, everybody. It is, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's just a remark from our institution, which do the risk assessment, biological and chemical risk assessment. I think that we must first start by implementing a risk management system that is complete, from risk detection to evaluation to management to communication, that at all institution level, at our institution level of our respective countries, this process begin with laws, SOPs, trainings, and to make a risk management truly, we have all the system that we have to to improve. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment.
Any other question, online or offline? All right, so if we don't have any other question, I would like to thank Dr. Chivuka for facilitating us wonderfully in this session, and then introduce our next session, which is Building GCBR Capacity, a case study of Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology by Mr. James Robert Wakunkwi Sakwa. All right. Yes, Mr. James.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ian. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody, depending on where you are. I'm back again this afternoon with a topic on our establishment of bachelor's degree course in biosafety biosecurity at our Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology. And this is a report following a needs assessment survey that we did after we got into partnership with IFBA, the International Federation of Biosafety Associations, and the University of British Columbia. And we are very grateful that we received support from the Canadian government to be able to run with this project. Next slide, please. So we have a project team that is aligning this affair, and we have the chairman of the Department of Medical Lab Science at the university, myself, working with laboratory instructor, I'm the technical assistant to the PI, who is my chairman. Then we have one Albert Nyasi, who is IFBA's East African Program Coordinator. And there's Dr. Patrick Okanya, a senior lecturer at Applied Science and Technology University, which is in Nairobi. Then we have Dr. Mary Sarigo, a senior science analyst at the National Commission for Science and Research. And then Professor Jeremy Seni from Catholic University of Allied Sciences in Tanzania. Then there is Bruce Anderson, Director of Occupational Health Safety, UBC, and then the Executive Director of IFBA, Maureen Ellis. Next. So this project really is stemming from our innovative way of how we were doing things. So we decided then that we have been educating students in medical lab science and medical biotechnology all these years. And in the curriculum, we have been teaching them about the fundamentals of biosafety and biosecurity. But in 2019, like I said yesterday, we started then implementing the National Biorisk Management Curriculum within their time in the university. So we are in the process of preparing the curriculum, and at this stage, we are actually submitting to the Commission for University Education. So before all this happened, then you had to do a survey. So these findings we are sharing with you so that you can inform our way forward as part of our future planning and then implementation and growth. Next. So how have we been cultivating these safety biosecurity issues within the profession? Ever since we started about 13 years ago, when we started doing medical lab science together with the medical biotechnology, and we are doing all this at both diploma and degree level. We have been focusing on fundamentals as I've said. And our structure of delivery of these courses is that the first 2 years, the students do general science. And then the last 2, because the degree takes 4, they now specialize. Those of medical lab science go their way, and those of medical biotechnology go their way. It is the same way we want to calculate as we undertake this cultivation of biosafety biosecurity profession. The students at the same time, the qualifications are the same. They do the first years together, and then in year 3, they become senior. Everybody goes to the area of concern. So our faculty is composed of colleagues who are trained in quality management system and safety and security. So we try to calculate the culture into the students at formative stages on how to conduct lab practices in safe, ethical, environmental sound, and compliant establishments using standards and principles, and then also important to protect themselves and their colleagues from others associated with the services in both clinical and research settings, and then be able to respond appropriately to any emergency that may arise within the lab setting, and also apply proper waste management measures to mitigate hazards and promote safe working environment, supporting a positive attitude of lab biosafety and biosecurity. As I said yesterday, biosecurity has been masked majorly by biosafety, and now we are trying to bring out biosecurity distinctly so that students and colleagues alike understand. And then importantly, as we have been hearing through the presentations from yesterday, we are also calculating the culture of being able to conduct research and then practice risk management assessment, and then practice is management. Next slide. So from 2019, this is the cover of our Kenya Laboratory Risk Management curriculum that came out in 2019, that then incorporates the One Health concept principally, that can be cascaded and implemented by anybody in whatever sector, not only for medical laboratory. And it gives a general overview of security practices, equipment and facilities required for safe and secure handling of dangerous pathogens and potential infectious material in biomedical laboratory, regardless of whether it's animal, human, plant, whatever it is. So it helps the students or the trainee to acquire knowledge and understanding of the fundamentals of biosecurity in this work, and then it is adopting the One Health concept. So our Department of Medical Lab Science and Technology is domiciled within the School of Public Health, Biomedical Science and Technology. And we, at the end of last year, we did hold our latest curriculum review workshop for all departments as required by the regulator for universities, that is known as Commission for University Education. So we are focused on commencing a distinct biosafety program in the faculty, and we are having considerations on if you're going to do a diploma course for the same, postgraduate diploma and master programs in the same. So we have been continuing to hold stakeholders meetings. Next slide. So our innovative way of doing things is that on the left of this slide is the transcript, academic transcript, that only mentions biosafety as a unit. But now, when we adopted the national curriculum for biorisk management, we then started giving the students extra modules, because the modules are 13. If you can look at the right of the slide below, those are 13 modules. So we cannot do these modules in one semester. So we customized our calendar such that the schedule shows that after the requisite unit in the transcript, we proceed to finish the other balance of the modules. And when they are done, we actually certify them. And we have got two kinds of certifications, because in calculating the culture, a student must understand why to pursue a biorisk management course, the way the national curriculum outlines. So there is a certificate of completion and certificate of attendance, because the extra modules are done off the semester after the first semester as transcript. So for one to earn this certificate fully, they must attend all the other balance of the modules, and then they get certified. Next slide. So the IFPA collaboration, the first meeting we had was with the East African Program Coordinator, and we discussed about the collaborative effort of establishing an graduate program. And that was around October last year. And then we were invited to Arusha for a meeting of the East African countries on matters biosafety, biosecurity, under the auspices of IFPA. Next slide. So the discussions were held, and we presented the innovative way of how we were doing things. And then we then came to an agreement with IFPA then that we need to establish a professional technical committee that will be looking at this program, and which is going to build upon our existing unit course in biosafety and security in both medical lab sciences and medical biotechnology programs, to create a new undergraduate degree program in biosafety and security, biological non-proliferation. So all students undertake related courses in the first 2 years, as I've said, followed by specializing in the distinct discipline together with a practical laboratory and field experience and capstone letters. So we were actually ambitious and we were targeting to admit this month. And of course, there have been delays with the issues with elections because there was a time that there was a lacuna and we have not moved with speed, but I'm glad that we are still within the timeline because once the Commission for University Education accepts that we are okay, we meet all the requirements, then we should be able to advertise for admission next month. And other partners, as I've enumerated in the project team, include those that are listed. Next slide. So our survey, what was the methodology? We did design an electronic questionnaire. We updated it, and then we put the needs assessment survey and segregated both the respondents into those who are in school or universities and those who are working and those who are continuing their education as they work. And we wanted to look at all those who are already working also in this field of cybersecurity. So it was directed towards both students, practicing medical laboratory professionals, senior management of organizations whose activities require the services of a safety professional throughout East Africa. And at this point, I want to mention then that East Africa extends to several countries within the Great Lakes region. And then we also have the East, Central, and Southern Africa network that also now extends towards the south of the continent. What we have been missing in these networks is the north, and I'm very glad that I'm addressing colleagues from the northern part of the continent. So this is how we spread this questionnaire using the networks that we have. Next slide. So it was virtually distributed, and as said, now you can see you have East, Central, Southern Africa, and 100 stakeholder participants completed the questionnaire within the time stipulated. And when we reviewed the respondents, we are looking at locally, our country is devolved, has got 7 counties. So 13 were represented in this survey by way of those who sent back the questionnaire. And most of the institutions that were majorly responding are basically based in Nairobi. And we had institutions like the National Blood Transfusion Service. We have Kenya Medical Training College, the prison service. We have our colleagues serving there, the mental hospital, and then we also have the Kenya Medical Research Institute, CDC, National Public Health Laboratory Services, and then other counties that were represented individually, including the ones that are listed there, out of the 47. Next slide. Now, this assessment has its own strengths because of the existing partnership between IFBA and then UBC, and then the fact that we know our stakeholders, we engage with them as we test students on clinical experience or attachment. We maintain that relationship, and even when new establishments come up, we move very quickly to ensure that we have a network that assists us to gauge what the industry requires. Next. Of course, like in any process, there are limitations, there are things that don't work. We expected that we sent this questionnaire to about 5,000 colleagues, and only 100 responded within the time stipulated. So that was a limitation. And then some of the respondents were using abbreviations that really nobody understands what they are. So we found that a little negative. Next. So what are the findings? Under section 1 of this questionnaire, we're looking at demographic issues, and we wanted to look at the gender of people who participated. So more males participated than females, and then we look at age group. We had a big number of people aged between 36 and 45 actually responding. Next. And when it comes to level of education, we have an assortment. We have people who are who have a certificate. They're known as lab technicians. We have technologists with diploma, bachelor's, master's, PhD, even medical doctors participated. People with certificate of secondary education also did participate. But then we realized that the highest number of participants or respondents at 40% were those who hold a degree. Next slide. Now, when it comes to current job title occupation, there are a number of entitlements out there. We have lab managers, administrators, we have technologists, technicians, biomedical scientists, researchers, safety officers. And it was interesting to us that we looked at the highest number of respondents being laboratory technologists and technicians at 27%. And then for the part of students, we saw then that the highest number of students who responded were actually those who are doing postgraduate studies. Next. So when it comes to reviewing the current biosafety responsibilities for in-service professionals, those are the ones who are on the bench, who are actually serving, we realize then that 47% of them have full-time responsibility. They are engaged as biosafety, biosecurity officers. 50% of the people have customized their systems such that now biosafety, biosecurity is a distinct issue. Then we had also people who are if so people who had working safety but have no formal designated responsibility, which is what we really are looking forward to addressing at 17.2%. Next. Now, when it came to where the colleagues acquired knowledge and skills about biosafety, we realized then that at 67%, we had those who are attending training offered by an external organization, of course, which means then it was outsourced. And then we had a number of them attending, at 43% attending a training facilitated within the institution. Next slide. When it comes to section B of our questionnaire, we had so much interest on if colleagues find that there's need for this program and if it was going to benefit them. So when we looked at how they were rating the BSc in biosecurity on a scale of 1 to 10, majority at 48 said it is necessary. It is necessary to have this this training. Next. So when it comes to the benefits of the program, colleagues' expectation, if the institution that they work for will benefit from the program in the next 10 years or so, 83% were affirmative, while 17% were negative. And then in-service professionals who would register for CPD, collegiate professional development or education courses, in this, if offered at university level, convincing 92.7% agreed, and then 7.2% said it was not, they would not attend collegiate professional development. Then any barriers that might exist so that they cannot attend to this program, 70% were looking at the costs, unlimited campus accommodation availability, because our campus is based in the western part of the country. Actually, it's easier to go to Kampala by road from Kakamega than going to Nairobi. It's faster. 21% we're going to find a problem on how to justify the necessity of the program at their workplace, which agrees then that some of the institutions at around 17% still have not appointed biosafety officers. And then so 23% are thinking that there is no job prospects, and then 23% think there's no incentive to, and then 30%, the length required to be out for the period of the course is too much. And then 44% thought that by commuting, it will be difficult. And then 51% are thinking that even if they took leave, applied for leave, it might not be granted because of low staffing levels. And then 70% feel that the cost of the program is going to be huge. Next slide. So in section C, we are looking at the structure, how colleagues want us to structure the program, the curriculum. And then we looked at on full-time vis-a-vis part-time basis. 87 agree that full-time is okay. 13% disagree. And then preference of the program's courses delivery, 12% said person to person. In a classroom, 16 virtually, 75 blended, where you combine both one person to person and virtual. And then the schedule on how it will be executed, half the program Monday, Friday, 5%, the whole day, 15%, evening program Monday, Friday, 23%. Weekend program was the most favorable. People want to do it between Saturday and Sunday. Next. So, when you look at curriculum options in terms of course, core courses and electives, in accordance with the choice of the student, those who are saying that core courses were at 6 and elective was 64%, and the importance of students gaining practical experience in lab attachment as part of this curriculum for skills and competencies, which is cross-cutting. It was evaluated on a scale of 4. On a scale of 1 to 5, it was given a score of 4, which we found very, very, very nice. Next. And additional information which falls under section D of this survey tool that you used. Colleagues are thinking then that there should be scholarships offered, and then there must be a market requirement or need. They expect that the curriculum be delivered by relevantly qualified professionals, and it should be offered to all health cadres. They need frequent practicals and orientation. The issue of creating bachelor's, master's degree, postgraduate training after guys have undergone through the basic, and then exchange programs and site visits to high containment facilities. We all know that these high containment facilities are not found all over. There are very few, and then there needs to be exchange program, and then competent and committed lecturers, proposal and grant writing skills, employment opportunity, inclusion of terrorism in the curriculum, market-driven program, reputation, building national capacity, very important, model by security issues, and then market survey, which is about jobs, inclusion, prevention control, and waste management, inclusion of ISO 15190 and 35001, booster cost, and at least affordable fees. So those are the things that we got off in the space that you give respondents an opportunity to say any other thing that they might wish to say. Next. So, in conclusion, we then agreed as a project team that young professionals are desirous of joining and pursuing this career, and the proposed program has received wide acceptance and support from stakeholders. And in view of the pandemic, which is a new kid on the block, emerging and re-emerging diseases, there needs to have experienced personnel that can safely collect samples, manipulate them in a safe and secure environment for everyone's safety and security. And I would like to say then that this is the first attempt globally to create an undergraduate degree course. And this is going to be important to all of us. Next. So recommendation and next steps, we are seeking global partnerships. We are going to create a course structure incorporating all comments we receive, even the ones that will come from participants today. We are still working on finalizing our curriculum. And then we are finalizing the same by receiving these stakeholders, because even the regulator will have some comments to make. We don't know what they'll say. And then we'll incorporate in the edited version. After we're done with that, and we're hoping to be done as soon as possible. Luckily, they do things online. We have been uploading what they require since Monday. Hopefully, we'll be done. We were done yesterday. And then we will register this program with the Statutory Students Placement Body. We have the Kenya University and Colleges Central Placement Service, whereby students after high school, they become property of the government. And it's the government that posts them in all the universities in the Republic. But of course, there's an opportunity when they are admitted to review or change or switch to any other university. And then we are going to identify and engage qualified faculty. We are not going to confine ourselves to our country only. We are looking for experts from all over. So if you are an expert, we want to really talk to you. And then we are going to conduct sensitization outreach programs. Every secondary school is supposed to have a careers master who are expected to be taking students through careers that exist. We are going to sensitize them and involve immediate and future candidates to enlist in our program. Next slide. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. James Sakwa. Any questions or comments about the proposed undergraduate degree course in biosafety and biosecurity, the first globally?
Okay, thank you. You said for this program, the first year, the student undergo a general science study and later biosafety. My question is that the student that did the program in the lab, exactly what work they can do? Is it biosafety only activity, or they can do other laboratory practice?
Yes, James, you can respond to the question.
Okay. Thank you very much. The faculty deliberately has designed all programs that are conducted in the department in such a manner that the introductory to all sciences, whether biosafety, biosecurity, whether medical lab science, whether you want to do microbiology, whether you want to do medical entomology or medical parasitology, whatever, the first year is introductory, and it includes the general science. We want to do organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, we want to do basic mathematics, such that you standardize the students' thought process. Then in the second year, regardless of the course, a student is now started to be introduced to all the disciplines within the department at an introductory level. And then they determine, they agree then what they want to go for in the third and fourth year. Where in fourth year now is the specialization in that discipline, and then clinical attachment starts, and fourth year is exclusively clinical attachment or field attachment, so that they can really get the hands-on experience. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question here.
Yes, indeed, I have a comment and then a question. So for the comment, I think we are greatly appreciate this program, because this program is considered the unique along the continent, and the first one. And for my knowledge, it is unique worldwide. For my knowledge, I don't know any program like this in the world. So I greatly appreciate you, Dr. Sakawa, and all your group. This is the first point. The second, I would like, sorry, maybe I'm missing something. This program is established to, or developed to establish a separately biosafety and biosecurity faculty. So after secondary schools, I go to the faculty of biosafety and biosecurity. Is that the true, or you already have the faculty, for example, biotechnology, science, whatever, and you make another department within this established faculty concerning with biosafety and biosecurity? This is my first question. My second question is regarding the curriculum we are working on. I think you are keen to make these like practical issues. Sure, you should make an introductory theoretical issue and basics. But my question is that I think you are keen to make the hands-on training and experience in the lab and in the whatever level of the labs. So I am sure you are working on this. But my question is that you will separate this practical issue from the biosafety and biosecurity, or not? You combine both. Thank you so much.
Thank you, colleague Ali, Dr. Ali. We intend to have everybody follow our tradition, whether they are doing biosafety, biosecurity, or they are doing medical lab science and technology, or they are doing medical biotechnology, or medical parasitology, or medical microbiology. So it's still one department, okay? So when they report, they all do year 1 and 2 together. They learn some things, as I said earlier, within the department. But now, when they reach 3rd year, those who are doing respective courses, for example, biosafety, biosecurity, they go to another unit within the department that only deals with biosafety, biosecurity. The practical exposure for year 1 and 2 is still general. Everybody goes everywhere. But year 3 and 4, they go to specific facilities, institutions, or laboratories that deal with a specific subject matter. The issue of handling pathogens, it is very, 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 very tricky because we are also working closely with the CDC Africa and the AU to identify within the region where these students will be going to learn about hands-on on handling pathogens, high-risk pathogens. And on that end, we are working very closely with the University of British Columbia. In fact, there is an arrangement to send members of the faculty to go and have some hands-on experience from that country. But then this will be specific, will be only specific for students undergoing bachelor's degree in biosafety, biosecurity. The rest who are doing medical lab science will go to teaching hospitals, will go to university hospitals. The ones who are doing biomedical technology, medical biotechnology will go to research institutions, and we have a lot of them in our country. So we have a department, yes, but within the department, there are subject matter specific units that will handle the students from year 3. I hope I've answered you, Dr. Ali.
Yes, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Do we have any other question or comment?
Thank you for your presentation. I would like to know if your students support the dissertation of thesis of memory.
I'm not getting you.
If your students support the dissertation.
Yes, they will. They do the same way. Otherwise, then we get into problems with the regulator. They still have to do a project and they do a dissertation at the end of the course. Otherwise, they wouldn't graduate. The rules for graduate degree are standard.
The topic is more different. For example, for someone do his dissertation in the microbiology, the topic is more different, or it is focused only about for biosecurity.
It will be, if you're handling pathogens, let's say, for example, the example you're giving of microbiology, it will be hinged on how those pathogens are being handled safely and how they are secured. It will have to lean towards biosafety, biosecurity, not the issues to deal with the general medical microbiology that we do. There must be something to marry it to biosafety, biosecurity.
Thank you. Do we have any other question or comments? Yes. We have one more here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sakwa. This is not basically a question, but it's I would say a call to action. I know a number of us in this room are affiliated to different training institutions, and here we are talking about the different program that you and your team have come up with in biosafety and biosecurity. And what I would like to talk about is the steps that we are taking to see that biosafety and biosecurity can be embraced by other people in other fields, as opposed to only the students or the professionals in the biologicals. Because I can overly hear the program affiliated to medical lab science, medical biotechnology, and that would probably be the case everywhere else. But we are in a time where biosafety and biosecurity, we need a lot of innovation. When you look at things like PPE, a lot of PPE that is being used has been the same for so many years, a lot of decades. And the people who would maybe so much contribute to the innovations in this area are not necessarily in the biologicals. You'll find that they're either in design, they're in engineering fields. So I really just want to call upon all of us, if we can be able to see how important it is that we get on board even other professions, I think it would take us a long way into getting the efforts together to strengthen biosafety and biosecurity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, my dear sister. Colleagues, that is true, and we as colleagues, we are looking forward to most of the institutions of training, most of the countries coming together so that we can assist. Already you can see that within the country we have another university that is part of the project so that we can learn from each other. That is the Technical University of Kenya, and then the other one of the investigators comes from Mwanza, Tanzania. We are still open to work with all of us so that we can have this cultivation of this profession coming out. Now, one thing I must also share is that we are looking at establishing maybe postgraduate diploma also for people who have degrees in other fields to try and build faculty and mentor this young proposed cadre or career to its maturity. So we are looking forward to working with anybody who is ready to work with us. And I'm very glad myself because I've seen that Samira has said that she's deeply involved in Morocco, and I'm very happy because since the year 2003, I think as medical lab professionals from Africa, we have been trying to rally all of us together because we all know that there have been declarations. One classical example is the Abuja Declaration, which called on African governments to do certain things. There was also the Yaoundé Declaration. But then how do we fulfill this in our time? What is important today is that Africa CDC has come to being and is actually domiciled in the African Union. I think it's an entry point for us to ensure that Africa moves together in one fashion. In 2013, 2003, I think, we did form the Federation of African Associations of Medical Lab Sciences. And we had one professor, God rest his soul, who died. It was called Professor Peter Ndumbe from Cameroon. He got funding, I think from CDC, and he established a project for training people on how to do HIV diagnosis and opportunistic infections. So in the process, he had a line in his budget to establish a federation for African associations. And one of the things that was done to ensure that the continent moves together, we established charters. We established charters in East Africa, established charters in West Africa. Actually, our president comes from Nigeria. We were not able to penetrate the north, and I'm very grateful to Sinbio for bringing us together, because then we're going to have that connection. So each of the charters had a president, a vice president. I'm the first vice president for East Africa. Then we had a president from Chad, a first vice president from Chad, and then there was a vice president from, first vice president from, I think, Togo. And these chapters were supposed to have their own federations that are regional, so that we bring everybody on board. And what did we do? We domiciled the headquarters of the federation in Yaoundé, Cameroon, because of the fact that it's bilingual. And the Secretary General is based in Yaoundé, so that we are able to communicate with all our colleagues. So personally, I'm very excited, and I want to welcome all of you to come on board so that we can take this agenda forward together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. James. Any other question or comment before we break off for lunch? Okay, it seems we've exhausted all the questions, or probably it's the fact that we are running low on our energy. So Thank you very much, Mr. Sakwa, for that wonderful session. I'll now guide us on the next program. We are going to break off for lunch for 50 minutes, so we shall be back here at 2 p.m. East African time. When we return, I will facilitate a session on public-private cooperation. Then it will be followed by a session on risk communication, led by Tim Trevan. Yesterday at night, I sent all of you questions to your emails. I wasn't expecting answers back for your own consumption. Those are the questions that Tim will start with for the risk communication session to help you reflect on various things you'll be sharing about. So you have to answer them for your own consumption, but not for marking or evaluation or something like that. So don't worry about that. So the online participants, I sent you those to your email. Everyone must have received them. In case you've just joined us today and you didn't receive a copy of that, you can send me an email or you can send a text in the chat, and I will be able to send you that copy as we break off for lunch. So the fun program will be quite brief because people have to retire early for an evening program later for the physical participants. But nonetheless, we shall enjoy those sessions. So for now, online participants, you can take a break for 50 minutes. You can take a quick nap or food or whatever is applicable to your time zone. The physical participants shall equally do the same. All right, thank you very much. Let's meet again at 2 p.m. East African time.
Thank you very much.